Um, I just saw um, the greatest documentary I've ever seen in my life. I've seen many documentaries. I love documentaries about movies. I love all documentaries, really. I've seen them all. I mean, I've just seen any chance I get to see one, I take it. Um, but nothing uh, has ever even come close to 17. I'm sorry, not 17. That matters in this review, that documentary. But nothing comes close to Streetwise. And I decided to record this right after I got done watching it because I'm just really amazed at what I saw. In 1995, I've got my notes here, so I'm going to be looking down a little bit, but there's a lot to say about this. In 1995, there was a kind of a docudrama came out called Kids. I actually knew somebody that knew those filmmakers, and it was a really depressing movie. If you haven't seen it, it's just pretending to be a documentary. Not that's probably not the right way to put it. It's not a pretend documentary. It's just done documentary style to make you feel like you're living with these kids, and it's very depressing along the lines of Requiem for a Dream. And when it was over, I remember thinking, well, at least it's probably nothing like that. But in fact, it was probably worse. I want to explain my views on documentaries real quick. I never take them at face value. I always assume that the subjects understand they're on camera, especially in the early 80s where this was probably filmed on film. I watched the Criterion version restoration, which was brilliant. They probably had huge cameras right in their face. In fact, there were several times where I could tell they were probably asked to get closer to another subject just to fit them into frame. But so I always think that I'm only getting about 50 to 70% of reality when I watch a documentary. And with that, this was still an impressive film. And it was just shocking to see. I don't want to oversell it. I mean, if you go to see this, it's not like the first time you might see Saving Private Ryan, where it was really shocking to see some of that stuff for your first time on film, or Star Wars, the first time you see something like that is shocking. I don't want to oversell it in case anyone watching this decides to see it on the basis of my review. It's not shocking in the typical film sense. It's shocking if you really care about culture and civilization, particularly here in America. Now you may say, well, wait a minute, this is a documentary from 1984. Yeah, but if anything, it's gotten worse. And the film is actually timeless. It does not matter. This poverty is not going anywhere, and it's never gone anywhere. The film's aptly titled. Streetwise is the correct name for this film. It is showing you how these children can teach you, the viewer, how to be street smart, how to survive the streets. And you're just like blown away. You're just blown away. And it just shows documentaries can do something that fiction can't do. Kids, as great as it was as a movie, you just get done and it was a fantasy. Even the documentary style didn't sell it on. This sells you on it. Now I'm going to tell you, if you don't like documentaries, this movie's not for you. It is absolutely not for you. This is for people who love documentaries. If you're on the fence about documentaries, you may not like this. In my written review on 17, one of the things I said about the film was I personally didn't like it. I was very bored. I did not think that it was a well-done documentary. However, I had to admit that the nature of 17 was raw. And I do mean 17 this time, the actual documentary 17. It was raw. It was similar subject matter, just families in trouble, but it was about young kids that were in families that were in trouble. There's other documentaries I could talk about in the projects of LA and so forth, but I want to focus in on one instead of just going to a bunch of other documentaries. And the editing style in that documentary was pretty raw. It was just long. It was rarely really edited. It was just, they just threw it on the screen. People love that documentary. Maybe that's why. I didn't find the documentary compelling, but I did find that technique to be admirable. Now, somewhere around the 90s, or maybe even in the mid to late 80s, documentaries change. They become highly edited. Now, I don't know the source of this. It could be the way films change. I think it might have something to do with Michael Moore, who is a master at making entertaining documentaries. Now, I want to be clear. I think that his films are one-sided and dishonest. If you don't believe me, watch Fahrenheit 9/11, then watch Fahrenheit 9/11, and it will show you just how dishonest Michael Moore's films are. But that said, 17 is edited really well. I mean, it's edited to tell you the story of these children, but it takes nothing away from the authenticity at all. It improves it over 17. There's always, in video games, since I really like video games, there's games that come out that try to be realistic. World War II Online would be a good example of Battleground Europe is what it's called. And the more realistic it is, to the point that it gets away from what's fun, the less you're apt to actually play the game. So they have to find a balance, how to make it realistic and still be fun. And the same is true in documentaries. It has to be realistic, but it has to be watchable. And that was one of the problems with 17. That is not the issue at all with Streetwise. It is edited very well. Additionally, there's no narrator per se. The film is narrated by its subjects. From what I can tell, the narration is authentic. It's them talking. They may not even be looking at footage of themselves when they're speaking, actually. They're just, I think, being interviewed, and they're just choosing when to play the interviews over what you're seeing on the screen. And this is very effective. It's very effective and they use this masterfully. There's times where they're showing you what's going on and what they're saying, and sometimes it's congruent and sometimes it's contradictory. And they do this to great effect. This was a masterwork of documentary filmmaking. It really was. It was so good. Now, there are two halves to Streetwise, okay? The first half is the children and them growing up in the streets. And what you're hearing, this is so good, what you're hearing is almost the same theme over and over, how their families just aren't there for them. And how they're just this disconnect between them and their family. And there are sundry reasons why and there's this disconnect, okay? Sometimes, and they're various. Sometimes it's, my parents don't care about me. And other times it's, the parents weren't there. It was just a broken home. And the filmmakers just have no problem showing you the contradictions, because the second half of the film, you actually meet the families. And you don't see this coming. They make you think, well, the families aren't in the picture. Families are in the picture, very much so. And these people care. One father, this isn't really a spoiler, is in jail, and the kid is speaking to his father while he's in jail. And another kid is a pimp, and his parents are talking to him, and they love him, you know? And it's heartbreaking to watch, because you're sitting there and you're going, so what's the real answer here? It's hard to know, you know? And the filmmakers don't try to clear it up for you. There's no political nonsense in this. They're not trying to push politics of any kind. There's no time spent going, oh, look how awful America is, or look how messed up the system is. There's none of that pretentious nonsense. This is about the subjects that are in the film. So it's just so authentic, so rare, even really by early 80s standards, or through the 70s is really where film was. I've done this retrospective. There's this sense of constant pushing of conspiracy, post-Nixon. They're just not even going there in this stuff. They're just showing you what's going on. And have I said that it's really good? Now, for me, another thing is this: the 80s culture took place in Seattle, but they don't shy away from letting you hear what's on the radio that they're listening to, or hear or watch what they're watching on television. And all of it is songs I'd forgotten about that were popular then or aren't popular now. I have a big issue with what's considered popular 80s song now as to what was actually popular. Two totally different things. Song I had not heard since probably 1984. And I was like, I remember that song. It's just not popular today, but it was popular then. And it time-stamped the whole thing. And it's like, oh, I remember what was going on in my life when that song was popular. I remember what was going on in my life when this movie was being played on television. And so I even remember things that were going on in Seattle at that time. And this is called posterity, okay? They're saving this and preserving it for future generations. It's brilliant. You know exactly what was happening at that time in the world. It was all being time-stamped by the culture of the time. They didn't do it to preserve 80s pop culture. They did it so that you'd know what was going on in the world at this time. What was happening? What was important in the world to everyone else? And just showing you the world was passing these people by. There was a disconnect between what was popular in the ethos of the culture versus what was actually happening on the streets for some people. Finally, we get to the end here, and I just took my time on this. Probably be like Paris, Texas, get very few views, maybe none. But one day somebody will see it and may really get them to watch it, and they'll really be happy they did. The ending is a left hook. Straight up left hook. You don't see it coming. I'm still processing it. I've talked about how ending movies has been, it's difficult, but this couldn't have been more perfect. I don't know. They show you the inner relationship between these two people. They're two kids, and they've been building this up a little bit. They've been showing you, they haven't showed you the actual relations between the subjects. Now at the very, very end, they show you the relationships between. There's some showing of relationships between, but there's really just like, here what the females are going through, and here's what the males are going through, and now they're showing you the interconnection. And there's two subjects you've been following, and one of them's getting ready to, this isn't a huge spoiler, I'm going to keep it vague, is getting ready to go through a big change, and the other one is very upset. And all you've seen the whole time is just gruff and tough, learning how to handle the streets. They're just 2 steps away from prison. They behave as if they're in prison, and there's no reason to think that there's just no reason to believe you're going to get any emotion out of this. They don't try to get emotion out of this. And then you see these two two subjects, and what they're going through together. And you're going, oh yeah, this is about, they're going to cap this off by showing you these people care about each other. And their humanness is what's going to really define what this documentary's been about. And then they do a big reveal of what's been happening. And they show you that you've started to care for these people. A lot more than you think. And I'll tell you, the ending hurts. It hurt to watch. I won't lie to you. I really held back some tears. It was powerful. You didn't know you cared about these people. Think about that for a minute. What do we call people like this? Garbage human beings, street trash sometimes. And they show you that they're anything but. Very powerful film. 5 stars. Absolutely no problem whatsoever. Best documentary I've ever seen. Hands down. By far. I have to reevaluate where it goes in movies for me, because movies never get emotion out of me. I mean, this movie's effect on me was big. Really hope you enjoyed this review. I really hope you get to watch this, and I hope you get everything out of it I did, because it is absolutely brilliant.